A lot of people think about habits maybe in this kind of way, like a habit loop. The bad news is that the habit loop is probably more like a pigeon loop, because if a habit researcher tried to kind of create a loop around habits, it wouldn't look like that. And the only one who has a loop similar to the habit loop is Skinner in his study of pigeons. And so that is probably a very kind of oversimplification of habits, how they work. And what actually has been done is looking at that, is seeing what that has resulted in. Kind of this understanding of habits in a very simplistic way had led to, when looking at 115 habit-forming apps, very, very, very few of them actually using meaningful habit science. And for me, that's very hard to see. Like, it's very sad to see that most behavior change apps don't use habit science or behavior change science. If you wanted to understand habit formation and understand what predicts habit formation, what do you think is the biggest predictor? That the behavior is easy to do, that the user has high motivation, that the behavior is triggered in a consistent context, or that there's a supportive environment in place. Which of these four things do you think has the most impact on driving habit formation? All of them impact, but the most impactful in, for example, this study, looking at habit formation in people going to the gym, saw that consistency was the most important thing. And that has been shown in many other studies, that basically, generally, the most important thing for habits to form is cue, consistent cueing of the behavior. And what they said here as a finding was that maybe more important for habits to form is how rather than why someone does the behavior. So basically, how someone does the behavior more important than why they do it. So with this insight that consistency is king, what can we learn? Like, how can that improve our design choices? Well, for example, we now know that for habits to form, we really need to train our brains to not think, but just act. Like we put on a seatbelt without thinking, we do it. However, when I, a while ago, was doing Duolingo, I noticed something interesting. They have this streak freeze. So I actually had a streak of 200 days. And it looked still something like this, that after 200 days, most of my basically past days were blue, meaning that I have missed my lesson. And instead, the streak has been saved thanks to their streak freeze function. So I wondered, why? Why after 200 days have I not formed a habit? And basically this is what I realized, that Duolingo hadn't really supported me in finding the right context for me to do the habit. Never really supported me in making that a consistent thing. So sometimes I did it in the evening, sometimes on the way to work, sometimes on the bathroom, you name it. And so when we talk about consistency, what we can think about is them as kind of a habit statement. We talk about them as implementations, intentions in science. And if you can imagine that a lot of people go into using Duolingo maybe with this kind of habit statement, that they want to allow themselves space to study Spanish every day, or they're really motivated to do that. But that's a pretty bad habit statement. Wouldn't it be nice if someone had a habit statement that basically said that I will study Spanish using Duolingo on weekdays at 12 for 10 minutes on my lunch break? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Because if someone came with that, we know that they will be very likely, at least two times as likely to succeed with forming habit, all else being equal. So that is oftentimes a very overlooked component in habit formation. How well can we support people in forming this kind of very consistent and clear context? And I can't share exactly full information here, but actually we did recently an interesting intervention on this, and putting implementation intentions into a onboarding flow was able to actually drastically improve retention by kind of supporting consistency in context. So the kind of moral of the story here is that adding nuance to design choices, having a better understanding of what actually we talk about when we say, let's say, habit or motivation, can also bring much better design choices. So epic win. And maybe that's the last thing to say about why I think behavioral science is really useful as kind of a component to add to data science and design in general, is that it can kind of provides a third types of data. So you have what people do from maybe the data science. You have what people say coming from oftentimes user interviews and surveys and so on. But understanding also why people do what they do is really valuable. And so my favorite example here is doing user interviews, in fact, where I was sitting with someone who had provided a survey where they had been asked, what is your dietary preferences? They had said vegan in the survey, but I also had data collected from what they put into their kind of meal tracking. And in that data, I saw something different. I saw that they ate kebab almost every day in the past week. So that was kind of an interesting thing. Like, what people say and what they do is not always the same thing. And so understanding the why sometimes can be a really, really valuable thing in kind of like bridging that gap. And so that's oftentimes where that kind of behavioral science lens comes in complementing data science and design. And that's why behavioral design as a whole becomes a really, really powerful trifecta of sorts.